Welcome back for video 3 on our USA Jobs video series. My name is Kelsey White. I am the career advisor for the College of Natural Resources and the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences for the University of Idaho. And today we're just going to be covering some of the pro tips that you can be implementing into your application to get yourself first through artificial intelligence, second through the human resource personnel, and then thirdly onto the hiring manager to be referred for an interview. Instead of scrolling through the USA Jobs website, we're actually going to be jumping into kind of like the middle of a PowerPoint that I have made. So we're going to skip over some of the GS levels and some other things in the beginning of that PowerPoint that I've talked about in prior videos, and really just focus on some of the pro tips to help you in your application process. So diving into PowerPoint mode here, we're going to touch on two things. That's going to be format and content. And so diving into format here, we often get the question of, can I just use my own resume? And so you have like your own format versus the USA Jobs resume builder. And so my recommendation with this is to try to incorporate both. And what I mean by that is first, using the resume builder to include all of your work experiences and your education, build that out, proofread it, and then from there you're going to put it in view form. So when you look at your documents and you look underneath the resume tab and you have your resumes there is that view button. Click on that. You're going to copy your text, paste it into a Word document. From there, you can beautify it, make the formatting nice. You can also add in additional sections like volunteerism, skills, extracurricular involvement, certifications, languages, things like that you can build into this resume. And then of course you want to list those sections in order of relevance to the job that you're going to be applying for, and then you're going to make it look pretty. From there, you're going to convert that into a PDF, just export it, upload that to USA Jobs, and apply with that version. This is a really great middle ground where you can include the USA Jobs resume builder and all the information that the hiring manager is going to need to invite you for an interview, but it also gives you a little bit of wiggle room to incorporate a really nice format, to move things around a little bit, have a little bit more flexibility. And also to, on the other side of the artificial intelligence system, once your resume gets scanned and sent over to a real person, sometimes that font can shrink down to 7 point. The spacing disappears that you might have put in the resume builder, and so it can be really hard for a person to read. So editing a Word and then putting it in a PDF that's going to lock that formatting in is just really kind to the person on the other end receiving your application. Next is thinking about how do you actually write about your jobs, how do you write those descriptions. And so in the Federal Circle, the preferred method is narrative paragraphs as opposed to bullet points. However, if you do have bullet points and that is your personal preferred, that's not going to make or break you based on research that I've done recently. So where to pull from for that? Once you already have your base resume written and you have your job descriptions in there of what you already did, then you can start adding some more information in or editing information from there. And so looking at the duties section on the job posting will be helpful to help you navigate that, as well as two other sections that I recommend taking a peek at. And so when you go down into the how you'll be evaluated section of the job posting, there's going to be two things to look for in there. The first is going to be the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities. These will sometimes be very clearly listed in there for you to then put over into your resume. I'll go over that here in a second. And then secondarily is the questionnaire, which is just an assessment questionnaire to judge what your past experience and knowledge is with different tasks. So for the KSAs, you'll see here this posting very explicitly lists 4 KSAs. And you'll see in that last sentence there in that description that these are linked to the assessment questions. And so if you read through that, right, these knowledge, skills, abilities, competencies, and experience requirements as demonstrated by your responses to the assessment questionnaire. So that is going to be interwoven. That's why some of these posts do not have KSAs explicitly listed. So now let's think about how to incorporate these 4 KSAs very clearly on your resume for a human resources personnel to go through and assess your qualifications in these areas. So let's grab these 4. Let's put them over into our USA Jobs resume builder underneath this job, and we're going to very explicitly list these out. You'll see I put them in all caps there. And then from there, how can we make this a little bit easier to read and scan through when we're editing it in a Word document? And so we're going to take these 4, we're going to copy and paste into a Word document and beautify it, and then boom, you'll see that I have bolded, underlined them, and also added an additional section where you can put in more tasks and duties that you might have done in that role that are not described in those 4 KSAs. And so how to talk about these KSAs, you want to address how you perform this task on the job, maybe how did you collaborate with a team on those, what percentage of your job was spent doing these things, and then also to incorporating some tools and skills that you used to carry out fire management, for example, and so on and so forth for the rest of the KSAs. And now looking at a KSA that is a little bit more administrative related, here as an example, ability to write non-technical correspondence. And so I have 2 examples, 2 responses here that we'll go through, and you'll see very clearly which one is probably the better response. So response number 1, I type letters every day. Sometimes I have to type them from a draft that the manager gives me. I also use form letters, or the manager tells me that he wants me to write. I write memos requesting supplies or advising employees of training classes. I have been a secretary in my unit for 3 years and always finish my work quickly and correctly. And now let's look at response number 2. I am the secretary in my unit. I handle the writing of responses for most non-technical correspondence received in the unit and for all administrative matters within the unit. I respond using various form letters that we have. Sometimes I have to draft a letter from start to finish, depending on what the inquiry is about. For example, an employee may need a statement regarding leave balances, which I would write, or I might have to write a memo to the warehouse regarding supply shortages. When the manager writes memos, he will give them to me in draft form, and I will rewrite them to ensure proper grammar and to put them into the right format. Which response is better? And so response number 2 is the preferred response. It gives more relevant and useful information. It has an example backing things up. There is stronger language, right, saying I am the secretary in my unit. I handle the writing of responses, and then giving example, whereas here, sometimes I have to type them from a draft that the manager gives me. And so it is a little bit looser and weaker of language, and whereas the response number 2 has a little bit more strong, confident language, as well as an example to back them up. Next part of how you'll be evaluated is going to be the questionnaire. And so this is the assessment portion that I was talking about, and how that works is based on how you answer the questionnaire. It's going to be based on a point system to give you a certain amount of points to put you in a certain ranking. I will talk about that a little bit more in depth. I know that might sound a little bit vague, but I will touch on that here in a second. And so at the bottom of this section, you will see there that the link is provided for you to click on to preview it. And so part 1 is going to be your eligibility, and part 2 is the assessment. So part 1, eligibility, includes if you're a veteran, military spouse, current previous federal employee, education, and experience. And part 2 of the assessment is going to ask you about your previous education and experience with different tasks and job duties. This is to help them rank you on which GS scale you are going to be on. If there is a range of, say, like GS5 to GS7, or they hire from GS3 to GS5, they want to place you in the appropriate GS level. So my piece of advice with this is to rate yourself honestly, but don't shortchange yourself. Understanding what the word expert means can be really helpful in this, because most of the top level choices in the assessment is going to say, I consider myself an expert in this. And so if you can teach a person that task, if you can do that task unsupervised, you can consider yourself an expert. And so you'll want to make sure that you back up claims of those expertise in your resume in detail within the KSAs, or just within your job descriptions on your resume. And then the way that you answer this questionnaire is going to place you in one of 3 categories, and that is qualified, highly qualified, and best qualified. In order to make it on the referral list to the hiring manager to get offered an interview, you need to make it into the best qualified category. If you make it into qualified or highly qualified, your name will unfortunately not be passed on to the hiring manager. And so you can rate yourself close to an expert in everything to get through the artificial intelligence, but if it's not backed up in your resume, human resources can deduct points from that scoring system and bump you out of the best qualified category into maybe just the qualified or highly qualified category that will not get sent on to the hiring manager. So let's look at an example here pulled from another forestry example. You're going to see some very technical job tasks here, and then choice E is I am considered an expert in performing this task. I have supervised performance of this task, or I'm normally the person who is consulted by other workers to assist or train them in doing this task because of my expertise. And so if you answer E for this one, you'll want to make sure in your job description you are somewhere talking about, I have supervised the performance of measuring tree diameters and heights, canopy cover, and standold basal area, and I'm normally the person who was consulted by my other workers to train them in this task, right? So you want to explicitly combine the task and then how you answered it. If you select B and you've had just education in performing this task but have not yet performed it on the job, your transcripts will back that up, so you typically don't have to worry about that there. And then if the KSAs are explicitly listed on the job description, you can fit these underneath multiple KSAs. And so from there, you'll see I have a sentence at the end of each one of these descriptions in the KSAs. Back up any mention of the task from the questionnaire within the KSA. You can always put it in the additional section if it does not fall within one of the KSAs very clearly. Okay, so true or false question. There's no page limit, so I should put in every single detail for every single experience. We're going to go false on that one. So a few do's or don'ts here when considering how much information you are including, even though there is no page limit. There are definitely some things to consider. And so do expand on all of your relevant job duties, keyword being there, relevant. Do use very direct and concise language. Do write in great detail about the skills or tools you've used, and do back up each question in the questionnaire pretty thoroughly. You want to make sure you're including all that information to really create a strong resume and back up your scoring system that artificial intelligence gives you. And then a couple things to not do. And so that is, do not use very fluffy language and write very, very long paragraphs, and do not expand on the things that are not relevant to the job. And so you could have worked a customer service position in undergrad or in high school, and now you're pursuing a forestry career. You can still list those experiences like a barista or a cashier at Winco or something, right? You can still list those on your resume and talk about some of the skills you gained from those, like attention to detail, multitasking, teamwork, all that good stuff you can be including in there, but you don't want to expand on all of the job duties you had, because that's not going to help you get the job. And so that's here, right? Of like, the hiring manager wants to hear all the good stuff you've done in relation to the job that you're applying to, but they don't want to sift through a ton of information that's not going to help you nail that job. Okay, so to recap and just wrap up here, some key takeaways. Really make sure you're studying the job description well so you can write your best job descriptions for your past work experiences or educational experiences. Add your KSAs to your resume if the job posting explicitly states them. Read that questionnaire in advance if you can, and make sure you're backing up each one of those questions somewhere into a job description in your resume. And then finally, if you do have the time to move from just the resume builder over to a Word doc to edit the format, polish it up, and then export it as a PDF, I highly recommend doing so. At the same time, if you don't have the time to do that, you're on a time crunch, you just found this job and it's about to close, you're probably sitting in just fine shape to submit and apply with just the resume builder. It's probably not going to make or break you, but it just is a nice added additional step that helps the people reading your resume on the other end. So just want to thank you for tuning in and learning a little bit about USA Jobs with me today. If you are a current University of Idaho student or an alumni from the University of Idaho and you would like some help going through a USA Jobs application, please feel free to reach out to our office at this email here, careerservices@uidaho.edu. We serve our students and our alumni for pretty much the duration of their lives. So don't be shy, reach out to us if you'd like some help.